Welcome to the microeconomics lecture. Today we will be touching on supply. Before I start, I need you to change your mindset to seller. Alright, you have to change your mindset to the seller. You see the reflection of what we have done last week, which is the demand. So everything we do today is somehow the other side, the counterparty. So we will still be dealing with price change, and that will actually lead to movement along for your supply later on. And we will also be doing the shifting. Shifting will be due to another set of reasons. The set of reasons will be different from your demand. That means the determinants of that shift the supply curve will be different from the one that shifts the demand curve. Alright, so there will be another list for you to actually memorize. The supply analysis is in your textbook, and let us look at the definition of supply. You see the two words, keywords, willing and able again. However, in this time round, the meaning is different. Alright, when you talk about suppliers, whether they are willing to sell, this is selling, whether they are willing to sell, the willingness will depend whether there's enough profit or not. I repeat, whether there's enough profit or not. And the able will be looking at the production schedule, whether you can meet the production schedule. For example, there could be some buyers who want to buy a very big quantity from you. You are very willing to sell to them because there's a profit. However, your factory size is very small. Alright, if your factory size is too small and you cannot cope with that kind of quantity, you are unable to sell at that price to them. Alright? Of course, opposite is true. If your factory is able to produce, however, if the margin is too low, for example, you want to sell to those poor kids in Cambodia or whatever very cheaply, or as a charity, you may not be willing to do so. Alright? So willing and able, though it's the same keywords as demand, it is actually different when it comes to understanding. Now, for supply side, it will be a direct positive relationship. Why? Highlight this part. We'll be looking at this very, very often, which is diverting resources to higher price good. The assumption is that only one thing can change at a time, you see. So if you already managed to sell at higher price, that means you are supposed to get higher profit. That's the assumption. The cost, everything should stay the same, because only one thing can change at a time. Higher price, if the price increase, by selling at a higher price, you will gain more profit. So, by looking at that, you will actually be looking at a upward sloping supply curve. So there could be many different prices. But when the price is too low, you'll see that maybe only those suppliers who have very low cost can meet this kind of profit margin. Maybe the very big players with economies of scale, they can produce a more special way of producing that they can do it at very cheap cost. So they are willing to sell at $1. Alright? But as you go higher the price, you are actually attracting sellers to come in to sell to you. Look at this. This could be corn. If I'm a farmer and corn prices increase to $5, instead of growing corn and carrot, I may just grow corn. Can you see that? Because I'm diverting resources to the higher price item. In this case, the higher price item in this case is corn versus carrot. My land is fixed. I can make a decision. Either resources are scarce, remember, I can either grow corn or carrot. But when the corn price goes up, I would actually grow less carrot and grow more corn to reap higher profit. So the supply curve is actually an upward sloping curve. This is the normal supply curve. This is the normal supply curve. If you remember when we talk about demand, why demand is downward sloping, there are two reasons. One is income effect, the other one is substitution effect, correct? But for supply, we only have one reason for this thing to be upward sloping. And the reason, actually, we have seen it just now. The reason is that we are actually diverting resources to the higher price item. Alright? So this is the reason. Remember, if you are ever being asked what is the law of supply, law of supply would be is a direct and positive relationship. So everything will, the price, when the price go up, the quantity supplied will increase. Why is that so? Or why is the supply curve upward sloping? This is the answer. The higher price will encourage your firm to expand. As you can see from the graph, the higher the price, it will encourage more and more sellers to come into the picture. We move to the main part when we talk about the change versus change in quantity supplied versus the change in supply. It is the same thing. If it is a price change, it will be movement along. Alright? It will be movement along. Price change. Now, our price will be on along the y-axis, exactly like last week. Because next week we are going to put both demand and supply in the same graph that we have a transaction. So here, for the supply curve, when the price of corn increase from $2 to $4, you are actually encouraging sellers to come in to sell more. So if it is $2, maybe only 20,000 corn is being sold. But when it is $4, it increased to 50. You can imagine it's an upward movement along the curve. So be very careful about demand and supply. You must remember which one is which shape. Supply is upward sloping, demand is downward sloping. Alright? So your upward and downward movement will be different for demand and supply. What if supply increase? Now, if supply increase, it will actually shift the whole thing to the right. It will shift the thing to the right. Why shift to the right is an increase? You look at the origin, which is 0. When you move more to the right, can you see you are getting bigger numbers? You're selling bigger numbers. And what if decrease? It will shift it to the left. Okay, till now I think it is quite easy. But let us look at the determinants. What will cause a shift? Then we have another list to actually memorize. It will definitely be other than price itself. Let us go through one by one. The first one is the improvement in technology. Okay, why is the improvement in technology actually helps to produce more? For example, if you look at agricultural products, if you use better farming methods, you use maybe fertilizers, pesticides, or you will actually be able to create better harvest than previously possible. You use tractor for your harvest, it will be faster and so on. So it will lead to actually cost reduction. Some of the students may tell me, how can it be lead to cost reduction when you go and buy a tractor? Isn't the tractor going to cost a lot of money? Correct or not? But come to think about it, if you are an entrepreneur, what is your target? It is profit. If in the long run you cannot reap more profit, then you'll be better off if you buy the tractor. If you are worse off after you buy the tractor, due to the cost of the tractor, most probably you will not even invest in the tractor. Alright? They make calculated decision and they take risks. So here, if they have decided to buy the tractor, it must mean that the harvest should be much more than previous, and it should make up for the cost of the machinery in the long run. So if you think about that way, we are actually trying to run economies of scale. The more you have, you reap more harvest, you will actually have a reduction in cost per unit. Alright, so the supply will increase and supply curve shift to the right. and of course vice versa. When costs reduce, every supplier has fixed land, fixed resources, fixed money to do business. Correct? So when cost is reduced, you are able to buy more seeds. For example, if the price of seed is actually decreased, and so on. Technology also the same thing. If you can harvest more wheat, more corn, then you are actually reducing the cost of growing the corn. Next thing is prices of factors of production. What are factors of production? It is the land, labor, capital, entrepreneur. Alright, so if you have any reduction, that means, for example, your staff is willing to have a pay cut due to recession or whatever, you can actually be, if you have more resources, you can use, and then you can actually increase your supply. Correct? Opposite is true. If your land, the landlord want to increase the rental, then what will happen? You have to pay more money for the rent, you will have less money to produce your corn. Alright, so in that case you have to produce less corn. So if you produce less corn, you will shift to the left. Got it? Factors of production is the one that oftenly come up out of the field. Alright, this is the one that is quite oftenly coming up for assessments. Next is the substitute in production. This is different from substitutes. Substitutes is those, when we do demand, we talk about substitute, which is competing product for consumers to purchase, right? But now for supply, I need your effort to put in the word in production. So for supply, I don't want to see substitute. For supply, I want to see substitute in production. Alright? That will make more sense. What is substitute in production? The two things may not be related. I give you an example. Plastic chairs and plastic pail. Why are they substitute in production? It is because they are using plastics. So if I have plastic, I can either choose to manufacture plastic pail. If not, I can manufacture plastic chairs. You don't tell me you invert the pail and sit on it. Don't keep on thinking from the demand side, alright, from the consumer side. Think as the seller side. So what happens here is substitute in production, an increase in output will lead to a decrease. Reason, I only have this amount of raw materials, which is plastic. If I make more plastic chairs, of course I have less plastic for plastic pails. And I'm a businessman. I will definitely produce the one that is higher priced. So if plastic chairs increase price, I will take the plastic from plastic pail and use it to make plastic chairs. There are two ways of phrasing. One way is to say you divert to the higher price item, which in this case is the plastic chair. Or you can say divert resources away from the lower price item, if you do not know what is the higher price item. So you don't need to rack your mind and think what should be the higher price item. You just say divert resources away from the lower price item, or you can say divert resources to the higher price item. Alright, let's see some examples of the change in substitute. You have tennis balls and racket balls. Okay, let's look at the substitutes in production. As I mentioned, again, I need the word in production. So the factory owner can actually produce tennis balls or racket balls. Alright, in this instance, we will follow 6 steps. Example of 6 steps could be this. One of the first steps will be the price change. This is my method to help students to talk about how to elaborate the two graphs. Okay, so the first step would be the price of the original product change. Original product is the first one. So when the price changed, in this case, the price actually went up. So because of the price going up, ceteris paribus, other things remain the same. The idea is that the seller, who is in this case the supplier, will be thinking that he can reap more profit out from it. So he will divert resources to higher price item. In this case, will be the tennis balls. So he will be producing more. This is an upward movement along the supply curve, and thereby increasing the quantity supplied from Q1 to Q2. Now, let us see what is the next step. Remember, point number 2 is the movement along up or down. You must remember to talk about point number 2, the upward movement along from point A to point B. Okay? Step number 3, the quantity demanded or supplied. In this case, we are still talking about the quantity supplied of the product itself. In this case, the supply increase. Now, don't forget, we are supposed to talk about the relationship. The relationship in this case is substitute in production. When the supplier produce more tennis balls, because he's diverting resources to the higher price item, so where is the resources coming from? It's from the racket balls. The resources that he got could be the labor. The man who is producing the racket balls, the labor have to go to this side to produce the tennis balls. So there will be less resources available from the racket balls. Point number 5. There should be no change in price of the related good. When we talk about the related good, it is the racket balls. Tennis balls is the original product. Related product is the racket balls. In this case, the related products, how are they related? They are substitutes in production. So, since the price did not change, if the price change, it will be movement along again. Then both will be movement along. It doesn't make sense. And ceteris paribus, there can only be one change. Cannot be both changing. And since there is no price change for here, it will be a shift in the supply. How will it shift? You have to tell me shift to the left or right. In this case, since resources are diverted away from racket balls, the supply curve will shift to the left. Now let's look at another case of complements. Complements in production and not complements. Complements in production. Remember, I need the word in production again because this is supply. Now it's harder to understand this part. For example, I would say chicken and feather duster. You may be thinking, chicken and feather duster has no relation, has no relationship. If you think of it that way, you are thinking from the angle of consumers again. Remember, change your mindset to seller. So if I'm a farmer, now if I have chicken to sell, when I kill the chicken to sell, can you see that I will have a lot of chicken feathers, right? I don't sell the chicken. If you go NTUC fair price, you'll see the chicken, they will have already removed the feathers. So the same thing, I will have already removed the feathers, and the feathers I can make into a feather duster, right? So now look at the situation. Whether I like to make the feather duster is another matter. I have no choice. Reason, complements in production, when I produce one thing, in this case the chicken, I will automatically produce the feather duster, whether I like it or not. It comes together. It comes together. So now let us see the situation for the complements. Here we have the change in production. When a firm produces tofu and soya drink, I do not really like this particular example. Maybe we can change the example to something that is easier to understand. So maybe we change to beef and the leather. Alright, I repeat, for these complements in production, I would use the classic example of beef and leather. So now look at the situation. Let us assume that this is beef. Alright, this is beef and this is leather. What happens is leather is made out of cow skin. Let's see how the 6 steps work for the complements in production. The first step that we have is there will be some price change. Alright, the price change will be in the original product. In this case is the beef. So when the price of beef increase, what will happen? Look at point number 2, there will be a movement along. Price change is always movement along. So there will be an upward movement along the supply curve. Upward movement along the supply curve. And this will give rise to the quantity supplied for beef would increase. Why would the quantity supplied for beef be increased? It's because the suppliers will divert resources to the higher price item. In this case, beef increased price. Point number 4, you have to establish the relationship. So for the relationship itself, it will be complements in production. When they are trying to produce beef, they will kill more cows. As a result of killing more cows, the cow skin could be used to produce leather. And therefore, in this instance, by killing more cows for the beef, the target is to sell the beef. However, in the process, there are complements in production, they are jointly produced, whether they like it or not. So in this case, the leather is being produced at the same time. However, there's no change in the price of the related good. Beef is the original good. Leather is the related goods. How are they related? Complements in production. There's no change in the price for leather, and therefore, it cannot be a movement along for the supply curve. It must be a shift. And you are supposed to tell me how did it shift. The supply curve will shift to the right. Because now more cows are being killed, you will have more cow skin to make into leather, and therefore you will be shifting it to the right, further away from the origin to achieve a greater supply. So this part is a change in supply. So the next thing is the number of suppliers. If more people come to join this trade, you will have, of course, higher, your supply curve will shift to the right because there are more people selling the item. Okay, the next part is the harder to understand part. This part is the one that a lot of students confuse with the demand side. Okay, let me bring you back to the demand side. If you are a buyer, when you expect prices to increase, would you want to buy now? When you are a buyer, you expect prices to increase. You will buy now because it is cheaper to buy now. Alright? But if you are a seller, the opposite is happening. If you think that you can sell at a higher price in future, you will try to hoard the item. That means you will not want to sell now. You want to sell later when the price is increased. Correct? So what are the classic cases? It could be rice. If war is coming and you think that war is coming, a lot of people want to stock up rice. But what for you sell to them now, when maybe 1 week later when the situation is even worse, people more panic, then you sell at higher price. Alright? So what they do is, if you expect the price to increase, you will actually decrease supply now. You don't want to sell now, so you keep some. Keep some in the warehouse or whatever. This note now, the price haven't changed. It is just an expectation. If the price change, it will be movement along already for supply curve. Alright, it would have been movement along. This one, the keyword is actually expectations. It is not the price change yet. So for expectations, you want to reap higher profit, you sell only when the price is already gone higher. Alright, so now you will decrease your supply. Opposite is true. If you expect price to decrease, you quickly earn whatever you can now. Alright, so whatever in the warehouse, you just quickly take it out and sell now when the price is still high. Hopefully you clear your stock before the price drop. This part is the harder to understand, and please make sure you can explain. Please make sure you can explain. Okay, next is the weather conditions. Weather conditions, it can be due to whether it affects the agricultural product. So if you have bad weather, you will have poor harvest and so on, then it will shift to the left. It has nothing to do with pricing, and vice versa. Agreement among producers, if you all increase or reduce the production, what will happen is you can actually, this is more meant for OPEC or the oil industries. They can actually decide whether to produce more, dig up more oil or dig less and sell, maybe deciding the based on the demand they want to see what kind of price they want to sell. Okay, government policies can affect supply. How does it affect? Taxes and subsidies. If they tax, what will happen? The cost will increase. For the tax part, if they tax on the supplier will have increase in the cost, and once the cost increase, there is limited resources, so the supply will decrease and the supply curve will actually shift the left. Alright? Taxes could be GST, or it could be import tax or whatever tax that increase the cost. Of course, we will be looking at whether the seller can pass the tax to the consumers and make the consumer pay. So that will be 2 chapters later to see who is more hard up for the item. Alright? So how about subsidies? If there is a subsidy to the item, then more people would want to sell the product. So the cost actually decrease, it defrays some of the cost, and your supply curve will shift to the right. Let us look at the market supply individual. PDR is producer, PDR is producer. So let us look at the producer A and producer B. You can actually add them up to get the market supply, assuming there is only 2 producers in the market. So what is the market? The market is a horizontal summation. If you look along the y-axis, the 10, 25, 40, it is standard distance away from the origin. Alright, so this cannot be suddenly 40 and then 80, 120, it cannot be. It must be the same. So if you look at the red and the turquoise, choose any point, for example this point. At $10, A is willing to sell 2,000. Alright, at $10, as you can see here, there isn't. Why? B could be unwilling or unable. So there is no supply at that price. So you have to see the higher price, for example $25, then A will be willing to supply 3,000. As for B, at $25, maybe they can actually reap some profit out of it. So they will start selling 1,000 pieces. Okay? So to the 3,000 plus 1,000, it will end up at $25. That means that you have 4,000. Alright, so you do the same for the last point, and you actually plot the supply curve. An example of market supply, as you can see, we have the OPEC. They actually decide how much to take out and whether they want to sell at the different prices. So different country, other countries also join in to look at the market supply. So for example, below $10, no sellers are willing to sell at that price, and therefore there isn't any supply in the market. But as the price increase to 100, more than 150, all the sellers are willing to supply because there's a lot of profit to be earned, and therefore this number will be the biggest. We can actually look at some other situation like fixed supply. So what do we mean by fixed supply? This is a different case of supply curve which is not upward sloping. For this particular supply, at whatever the price that you have, you will find that the quantity supply is exactly the same. How can that be? How can that be? Example is Mona Lisa painting by Leonardo da Vinci. So what happens is that there is only one Mona Lisa painting, right? Whatever the price it is, the maximum supply can only be one. Of course, there is also those that are horizontal. Horizontal, that means regardless what the price that you pay is fixed, but then if it's horizontal, the price that you pay is fixed, but the supply is endless. It could be URA car park coupons. If you have money to buy, 1,000 packets of, $1 1 hour URA parking coupons from URA, I believe they will actually sell to you. Right? They can print whatever numbers they want to sell. Okay, with that I end the supply lecture. Thank you, class.